The rain pattered against the windows of Velvet, the most exclusive nightclub in the city, each droplet racing down the glass like tears I'd shed too many times this month. My reflection stared back at me. Hollow eyes rimmed with carefully applied eyeliner, lips painted crimson, blonde hair falling in loose waves around my shoulders. A stranger wearing my face. "You need to stop checking your phone, Eliza," Jen said, nudging my elbow and nearly causing me to spill my untouched martini. "He's not going to call." I slipped my phone back into my clutch, ignoring the painful twist in my chest. 3 weeks since Michael had walked out of our apartment with half our belongings and all of my dignity. 3 weeks of unanswered texts and sleepless nights. "I know," I whispered, more to convince myself than her. "I'm just checking the time." "Well, check this out instead." Jen nodded toward the VIP section. "Those guys have been watching us for the past 15 minutes. I followed her gaze to the elevated area cordoned off with velvet ropes. Through the haze of blue lighting and cigarette smoke, I caught a glimpse of 3 men in tailored suits. 2 were standing, vigilant and expressionless, while one sat with his back against plush leather, a glass of amber liquid cradled in long fingers. Not interested. I turned away, taking a small sip of my drink. "Eliza," Jen groaned. "The whole point of tonight was to get you out of your apartment. Michael was a jerk who cheated on you with his assistant. It's time to make him regret losing you." Make him regret losing me. The words settled into my chest, sparking something small and dangerous. Revenge had never been my style, but neither had getting my heart ripped out by someone I thought I'd marry someday. "Fine," I conceded, downing the rest of my martini in one burning gulp. "One dance, and then we can leave." We made our way to the dance floor, the bass thumping through the soles of my borrowed heels. Jen had insisted I wear her black dress. Too short, too tight, but perfect for someone attempting to forget themselves for a night. The fabric clung to my hips as I swayed to the music, letting it wash over me, pretending I was anywhere else but here. Then I felt it, a prickling sensation at the back of my neck, the uncomfortable awareness of being watched. I turned, scanning the crowd, and locked eyes with the man from the VIP section. Even from a distance, I could tell he was dangerously beautiful, sharp jawline, dark hair pushed back from his forehead, eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light. He didn't smile, didn't nod, just watched me with an intensity that made my skin flush. "Oh my God," Jen whispered, suddenly at my side. "Do you know who that is?" I shook my head, breaking eye contact and turning away. "That's Dante Russo." "As in, the Russo family." "As in, I don't care," I interrupted, suddenly desperate to leave. Something about his stare had left me feeling exposed, like he could see every broken piece I was trying to hide. "I think I'm ready to go home." "Are you insane? He's gorgeous, rich, and clearly interested in you, and clearly dangerous," I added, the words slipping out before I could stop it. I didn't know anything about him or his family, but something in my gut was screaming caution. "Just one drink," Jen pleaded. "One drink and then we'll leave." Before I could protest further, one of the men who had been standing in the VIP section appeared at our side, his presence causing the crowd to part like water. "Mr. Russo would like to invite you to join him," he said, voice low and expressionless. Not a request, a statement. Jen squeezed my arm hard enough to bruise. "We'd love to," she answered for us. I followed numbly as we were escorted up the steps to the VIP section, my heart hammering against my ribs. Up close, Dante Russo was even more intimidating. His suit was clearly bespoke, clinging to broad shoulders and a lean frame. A heavy watch glinted at his wrist, and a signet ring adorned his right hand. But it was his eyes that held me captive. Dark, intelligent, and completely unreadable. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the empty space beside him on the leather couch. I hesitated, but Jen gave me a small push forward. I perched on the edge of the seat, hyper-aware of the small distance between us. He smelled like expensive cologne, and something darker. Whiskey, perhaps, or danger. "What's your name?" His voice was deep, with the faintest hint of an accent I couldn't place. Eliza, I replied, resisting the urge to fidget under his scrutiny. Eliza, he repeated, as if tasting the syllables. Why do you look so sad, Eliza? The directness of his question startled me. I'm not sad. His lips curved into something too knowing to be a smile. Lying doesn't suit you. A waiter appeared with a bottle of champagne I was certain cost more than my monthly rent. I watched as bubbles rose to the surface of the glass placed in front of me, wishing I could disappear as easily. Thank you for the drink, but I was actually just leaving, I said, setting the untouched glass down. Stay. One word, spoken softly but with unmistakable command. I glanced around for Jen, only to find her chatting animatedly with one of Dante's associates several feet away, completely oblivious to my discomfort. I heard what your friend said, Dante continued, leaning slightly closer. About making someone regret losing you. Heat rushed to my cheeks. She was just trying to cheer me up. Was she wrong? I stared at my hands. No. Look at me, Eliza. I did, unable to resist the pull of his voice. Whoever he is, he's a fool, Dante said, his gaze traveling over my face with an intensity that made breathing difficult, and fools rarely recognize what they've lost until it's been taken by someone else. The implication in his words sent a shiver down my spine. This was dangerous. He was dangerous. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to walk away. You don't know anything about me, I whispered. I'd like to. He gestured to one of his men, who immediately approached. Paolo will drive you home tonight, whenever you're ready to leave. That's not necessary. I can call a cab. Dante's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. It wasn't a suggestion. I should have been offended by his presumption, but something in his tone made me think it was as much for my protection as it was a display of control. Still, I wasn't about to be ordered around by a stranger, no matter how intriguing. Thank you for the offer, but I came with my friend, and I'll leave with her. His eyes narrowed slightly, then he nodded once. As you wish. The evening progressed in a blur of champagne and stilted conversation. Jen was delighted by our sudden elevation to VIP status, while I remained on edge, constantly aware of Dante's presence beside me. He didn't speak much, but I felt his eyes following me whenever I shifted or reached for my drink. By midnight, the champagne had dulled my anxiety enough that I excused myself to use the restroom. The quiet of the hallway was a relief after the pounding music of the main floor. I leaned against the wall for a moment, closing my eyes and trying to make sense of the strange evening. Well, well. Look who's moved up in the world. My eyes snapped open at the familiar voice. Michael stood a few feet away, his expression a mixture of surprise and something darker. Beside him was a slender brunette, the assistant he'd left me for. Her arm wrapped possessively around his waist. Michael, I breathed, hating how my voice still caught on his name. What are you doing here? Same as you, apparently. His gaze swept over my dress, lingering on the hemline. Though I didn't realize you'd be jumping into bed with Dante Russo so quickly. The accusation stung more than it should have. You don't get to judge who I spend time with anymore. Do you even know who he is? Michael stepped closer, lowering his voice. The rumors about his family aren't your concern, a cold voice interrupted. I turned to find Dante standing in the hallway, his stance casual, but his eyes hard as they fixed on Michael. One of his men materialized behind him, a silent, imposing presence. Michael paled visibly, taking a step back. We were just catching up, old friends. Is that right? Dante looked at me, one eyebrow raised in question. I should have corrected him, should have explained that Michael was my ex, but something petty and vindictive kept me silent. Let him think what he wanted. Let Michael squirm. We're leaving. Michael muttered to his date, guiding her quickly past us and back toward the main floor. As they disappeared around the corner, I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Thank you, I said quietly. Dante moved closer, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his gaze. Was he the one? I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. He looked at you like you belonged to him, Dante said, his voice dangerously soft. He's wrong. Before I could process his words, he reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from my face with surprising gentleness. You don't belong to him anymore. The implication hung in the air between us, Not a question, not quite a statement. Something more like a promise. Or a threat. "I should find Jen," I said, stepping away from his touch. "It's getting late." "Of course." He stepped back, giving me space. "But, Eliza..." I paused, looking back at him. "This isn't the last time we'll see each other." I returned to find Jen, buzzing with the encounter and eager to leave. As we gathered our things, I felt Dante watching me from across the room. I didn't look back as we exited the club, but I wasn't surprised to find a sleek black SUV waiting at the curb. The same man from earlier, Paolo, opened the door. "Mr. Russo insists." Jen squealed with delight at the prospect of a free ride home, but I hesitated, my instincts warring with my curiosity. "It's just a ride, Eliza," Jen whispered, already sliding into the luxurious interior. "Just a ride," I told myself as I followed her, but as the door closed behind us with a heavy thud, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just stepped into something I wouldn't be able to walk away from so easily. What I didn't know then was that my innocent whisper in a nightclub had caught the attention of the most dangerous man in the city. A man who took what he wanted and never let go. A man who would soon make Michael's betrayal seem like a blessing in disguise. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through curtains I'd forgotten to close and a pounding headache that matched the rhythm of my heartbeat. Memories of the previous night came flooding back in fragments: champagne bubbles, Michael's accusatory glare, and Dante Russo's intense stare that seemed to strip away every defense I'd built. "You don't belong to him anymore," his words echoed in my mind as I dragged myself to the kitchen for coffee, my bare feet cold against the hardwood floors of my small apartment. The place felt emptier since Michael had left, taking not just his belongings, but the future I'd foolishly planned around him. I was stirring cream into my coffee when my phone chimed with a text from Jen. "OMG, did you see the news? Your new boyfriend is trending." I frowned, typing back, "He's not my boyfriend. What news?" She sent a link to a local news article. The headline made my stomach drop. "Dante Russo takes control of family empire following father's retirement." I skimmed the article, my coffee growing cold beside me. It detailed how Dante, at 32, had officially taken over the Russo Group, described as a diversified business empire with interests in real estate, hospitality, and import-export. Between the lines, however, were careful allusions to the family's controversial history and alleged connections. I set my phone down, trying to ignore the flutter of unease. Whatever Dante Russo was involved in, it wasn't my concern. Last night had been a strange detour, nothing more. I spent the morning applying for jobs, another consequence of Michael's departure. We'd worked at the same architectural firm, and while he'd kept his position as junior partner, I'd found it impossible to stay after our breakup, especially once rumors spread about why he'd left me. By afternoon, my inbox remained depressingly empty of responses, and I decided to clear my head with a walk. October had painted the city in rich golds and reds, the air crisp with the promise of winter. I pulled on a cream sweater and headed to the small coffee shop 3 blocks from my apartment. I was standing in line, mentally calculating how much of my dwindling savings I could justify spending on an overpriced latte when the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. That same feeling from the club, of being watched. Slowly, I turned, scanning the cafe. My heart stuttered when I spotted him. Not Dante, but the man called Paolo, sitting at a corner table with a newspaper and an untouched espresso. Our eyes met, and he gave a slight nod of acknowledgement before returning to his paper. Was it coincidence? It had to be. The cafe was popular, and my neighborhood wasn't exactly exclusive. But as I carried my coffee to a table by the window, the rational part of my brain insisted this was more than chance. I pulled out my phone and texted Jen. "I think I'm being followed." Her response was immediate. "What? By who?" "One of Dante's men is at my coffee shop. Could be coincidence?" "Girl, men like that don't do coincidence. He's had you followed. That's either creepy AF or the hottest thing I've ever heard." I glanced at Paolo, who continued to pretend to read his paper. Definitely leaning toward creepy. Or protective. Think about it. You met a rich, powerful guy, and now he's making sure you're safe. It's like a movie. I locked my phone without responding. Jen had always lived with her head in the clouds, romanticizing everything. In reality, being followed wasn't romantic. It was unsettling, regardless of how my traitorous heart had skipped when I'd seen Paolo. Finishing my coffee quickly, I gathered my things and left, deliberately not looking in Paolo's direction. Outside, the afternoon had turned gray, clouds gathering ominously overhead. I quickened my pace, suddenly eager to be home. I was fishing for my keys at the entrance to my apartment building when a sleek black Bentley pulled up to the curb. My breath caught as the rear door opened, and Dante Russo stepped out, as immaculate in daylight as he had been in the dim lighting of the club. His dark suit was impeccable, his hair slightly tousled by the wind. Behind him, another suited man stood vigilant beside the car. "Eliza," he said, my name sounding like something precious in his accent. "I hope I'm not intruding." I clutched my keys tighter. "How do you know where I live? Paolo drove you home last night. And he just happened to be at my coffee shop today." A ghost of a smile touched Dante's lips. "I asked him to keep an eye on you. That's—" I searched for the right word, anger and confusion battling within me. "Inappropriate. You don't even know me." "I'd like to." He stepped closer, and I caught the scent of his cologne, sandalwood, and something distinctly masculine. "Have dinner with me tonight." It wasn't a question, but it wasn't quite a command either. Something in between that left room for refusal, though his confident stance suggested he didn't expect one. "Why me?" I asked, genuinely puzzled. There must be dozens of women who would jump at the chance to have dinner with Dante Russo. "Hundreds," he corrected, without a trace of arrogance. "But none of them looked at me the way you did last night." "And how was that?" "Like you weren't impressed." His eyes, dark and intense, held mine. "Like you saw past the name and the money to something you weren't sure you wanted to see." The accuracy of his assessment was unnerving. I had seen something dangerous in him, something that should have sent me running in the opposite direction. Yet here I was, still standing before him, still caught in his gravitational pull. "I can't," I said finally. "I'm not in a good place right now." "Because of him? The man from the club?" I nodded, hating how easily tears threatened at the mere mention of Michael. "It's still fresh." Dante stepped closer, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. "Let me help you forget him." My breath hitched. "I don't think that's a good idea." "Perhaps not," he conceded. "But I'm rarely interested in good ideas, Eliza. I'm interested in you." A raindrop fell on my cheek, followed quickly by another. Within seconds, the skies opened up, rain falling in earnest around us. Dante didn't seem to notice or care as water darkened his suit and plastered his hair to his forehead. "Just dinner," he said, raindrops clinging to his eyelashes. "One night." Something in his voice, in the intensity of his gaze, made refusal impossible, or perhaps it was the loneliness that had been my constant companion since Michael left. The quiet apartment that no longer felt like home. "Okay," I whispered, the word nearly lost in the sound of falling rain. "Just dinner." His smile transformed his face, softening the hard edges and making him look younger, almost boyish. "I'll pick you up at 8. Before I could respond, he reached out, his thumb brushing my cheek where a raindrop had fallen, or perhaps a tear. The touch was brief but electric, sending a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold rain. Then he was gone, sliding back into the Bentley, which pulled away smoothly from the curb. I stood in the rain for a moment longer, keys clutched in my trembling hand, wondering what I had just agreed to. By 8 o'clock, I had changed my outfit 4 times, finally settling on a simple black dress that Michael had always said was too conservative. My hair fell in loose waves around my shoulders, and I'd applied minimal makeup, trying not to look like I was trying too hard. The buzzer rang precisely at 8. When I opened the door, Dante stood in the hallway, holding a single red rose. Up close, in the harsh fluorescent lighting of my building, I could see details I'd missed before. A small scar above his right eyebrow, the way his eyes weren't just dark but flecked with gold, the slight shadow of stubble along his jaw. "You look beautiful," he said, offering me the rose. I accepted it, our fingers brushing briefly. "Thank you. You look the same." He laughed, the sound rich and unexpected. "I'll take that as a compliment." Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under streetlights. The same Bentley waited at the curb, Paolo holding the door open with an expressionless face. "Where are we going?" I asked as we settled into the leather seats. "Somewhere private," Dante replied, his eyes never leaving my face. "I want to hear your story without interruptions." The restaurant, when we arrived, wasn't a restaurant at all, but a beautifully restored townhouse in the city's most exclusive district. A uniformed staff member greeted Dante by name, escorting us through a marble foyer and into a private dining room where a table had been set for two. Crystal glasses caught the light from a chandelier overhead, and fresh flowers perfumed the air. "Do you own this place?" I asked as he pulled out my chair. "My family does." He took the seat across from me. "We keep it for special occasions." The implication that dinner with me constituted a special occasion wasn't lost on me. "You hardly know me," I said quietly. "I could be anyone, but you're not anyone, are you, Eliza?" His gaze was penetrating. "You're the woman who caught my attention in a room full of people trying to be noticed." A server appeared with a bottle of wine, pouring 2 glasses before disappearing silently. Dante lifted his glass. "To new beginnings." I hesitated before raising mine. "To clarity." He smiled, something knowing in his expression. "Tell me about him." The abrupt change of subject startled me. "Who?" "The man who hurt you. The fool." I set my glass down. "I'd rather not talk about Michael." "Michael," Dante repeated, the name sounding like a curse on his lips. "What did he do?" Perhaps it was the wine, or the intensity of Dante's gaze, or simply the need to finally voice the humiliation I'd been carrying, but I found myself answering. "He was my fiancé. We worked together at an architectural firm. 3 weeks ago, I came home early from a site visit to find him packing his things." I swallowed hard, the memory still raw. He told me he'd been seeing his assistant for months and that he was moving in with her. "Did he give you a reason?" Dante's voice was soft, but I could sense the anger beneath. "He said I was too predictable, too safe. That he needed someone who excited him." The words still stung, each one a reminder of my inadequacy. Dante's hand curled into a fist on the table. "He's a fool." "So you've said." And I meant it. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine. "There's nothing safe about you, Eliza. There's fire beneath that careful exterior. I saw it the moment I laid eyes on you." The server returned with the first course, saving me from having to respond. The meal progressed through exquisite dishes I couldn't name, each more delicious than the last. Dante directed the conversation away from Michael, asking instead about my work, my dreams, my childhood in a small town 3 hours from the city. I found myself relaxing as the evening wore on, drawn in by Dante's undivided attention and surprising wit. He spoke about his own childhood, the weight of family expectations, summers in Italy with his grandfather, the books that had shaped his worldview. He was educated, articulate, charming in a way that seemed at odds with the dangerous aura that surrounded him. Not once did he mention his family's business, or the retirement that had made headlines. When I carefully steered the conversation in that direction, he deflected with practiced ease. By dessert, a decadent chocolate creation that melted on my tongue, I had almost forgotten the circumstances that had brought us together, almost forgotten the way Paolo had followed me that afternoon, or the rumors about the Russo family that I'd skimmed in the news. "You're smiling," Dante observed, watching me over the rim of his glass. "It suits you." I set my fork down. I didn't expect to enjoy myself tonight. Because of who I am. The directness of the question caught me off guard. "Because of who I am," I corrected. "I'm not ready for whatever this is." "And what do you think this is?" His eyes never left mine, searching for something I wasn't sure I wanted him to find. "I don't know," I admitted. "But it feels complicated." "Life is complicated, Eliza. It's what makes it worth living." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "I want to see you again." The intensity in his gaze made my heart race. "Dante, A discreet knock interrupted us. Paolo entered, bending to whisper something in Dante's ear. The transformation was immediate. Dante's expression hardened, the warmth in his eyes replaced by something cold and calculating. He nodded once, and Paolo retreated. I apologize, Dante said, his voice clipped. There's a matter I need to attend to. He stood, adjusting his cuffs with practiced precision. Paolo will see you home safely. Is everything okay? I asked, rising as well. Nothing for you to worry about. He moved around the table, closing the distance between us. Before I could react, he took my hand, raising it to his lips in a gesture that felt both old-fashioned and intimate. Thank you for tonight, Eliza. Then he was gone, leaving me with the lingering warmth of his lips on my skin and a growing sense that I had glimpsed only the surface of Dante Russo. Paolo drove me home in silence, the Bentley gliding through streets that seemed suddenly unfamiliar. At my door, he handed me a small velvet box. From Mr. Russo, he said, his voice betraying no emotion. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet, a small charm in the shape of a key dangling from it. There was no note, no explanation. As I closed my apartment door behind me, the emptiness seemed more pronounced than ever. I slipped the bracelet onto my wrist, the metal cool against my skin, and wondered what door that key was meant to unlock, and whether I was brave enough to find out. A week passed without word from Dante. The silver bracelet remained on my wrist, a constant reminder of our dinner and the questions it had left unanswered. I checked my phone more often than I cared to admit, caught between relief and disappointment each time the screen remained dark. Maybe he's just busy, Jen suggested over coffee at my apartment. Taking over a family empire has to involve some paperwork, right? I gave her a wry smile. Or maybe dinner was enough to satisfy his curiosity. She reached across the table, touching the bracelet. Men don't give jewelry to women they're done with. I pulled my hand away, uncomfortable with the weight her words carried. It was just a bracelet, Jen, not a diamond ring. A Bulgari bracelet, she corrected, having insisted on researching the design the moment I'd shown it to her. Worth more than my car, I sighed, rising to rinse my mug in the sink. It doesn't matter. It was one dinner, and now it's over. But even as I said the words, I knew they weren't entirely true. Something had shifted that night, awakening a part of me I'd thought died with Michael's betrayal. A part that craved connection, that wasn't afraid to want. That afternoon, I had an interview at a small design firm across town. I wore a navy blue blazer over a cream blouse, my hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. Professional, capable, everything I needed to be to restart my career. The silver bracelet was hidden beneath my sleeve, a secret talisman I couldn't bring myself to remove. The interview went well, the principal architect impressed with my portfolio and experience. As we shook hands, I felt a flutter of hope, the first tangible sign that my life was moving forward again. Emerging from the building, I blinked in the bright autumn sunlight, a smile tugging at my lips. The sidewalks were busy with late afternoon commuters, the air crisp with the promise of approaching winter. I decided to walk a few blocks before catching the subway, savoring the rare feeling of optimism. I was waiting at a crosswalk when a sleek black SUV pulled up beside me. The window rolled down smoothly, revealing Paolo's expressionless face. "Miss Parker," he said with a slight nod. "Mr. Russo would like to see you." My pulse quickened. Now? If it's convenient. Nothing about Paolo's tone suggested that inconvenience was an option, but I appreciated the pretense of choice. "I have plans," I lied, immediately wondering why I felt the need to create distance. Paolo's expression didn't change. "Mr. Russo thought you might say that. He asked me to give you this." He handed me a small envelope. Inside was a business card with an address handwritten on the back, along with a single line in elegant script, "Please." Just one word, but it carried the weight of something I couldn't quite name. Reluctance warred with curiosity, pride with a deeper, more insistent longing. "I'll meet him there," I said finally, tucking the card into my purse. "I need to go home first." Paolo nodded, seemingly unsurprised. "The car will be waiting whenever you're ready." At my apartment, I changed quickly, discarding my interview outfit for a simple black dress and low heels. I let my hair down, applied a touch of makeup, and stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. "What are you doing?" I whispered to myself, recognizing the dangerous territory I was entering. Dante Russo was not Michael. He was something far more complex, far more treacherous, yet I found myself back on the street, sliding into the waiting SUV, guided by something stronger than caution. The address led to a sprawling estate on the outskirts of the city, hidden behind high stone walls, and an imposing iron gate that swung open as we approached. The driveway curved through manicured gardens before revealing a mansion that looked like it belonged in another century, all stone and ivy, and leaded glass windows reflecting the setting sun. Paolo escorted me to massive wooden doors that opened before we reached them, revealing a foyer with soaring ceilings and marble floors. A maid appeared silently, taking my coat before Paolo led me deeper into the house. We passed rooms filled with antiques and artwork that belonged in museums, each space more opulent than the last. Finally, we reached a set of double doors, which Paolo opened without knocking. The library beyond was vast. 2 stories of bookshelves interrupted only by tall windows that looked out over the gardens. A fire crackled in a stone fireplace large enough to stand in, casting warm light across leather chairs and oriental rugs. Dante stood by one of the windows, his back to the door, silhouetted against the fading daylight. He turned as I entered, and my breath caught at the sight of him, dressed more casually than I'd seen before in dark trousers and a charcoal sweater that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. "Eliza," he said, my name a caress in his accented voice. "You came." Paolo withdrew, closing the doors behind him with a soft click. "Your invitation was hard to refuse," I said, trying for lightness despite the nervous flutter in my chest. Dante crossed the room, stopping a careful distance away. "I've been away on business. I apologize for the silence." "You don't owe me explanations," I replied, more sharply than intended. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "No, but I'd like to give them anyway." He gestured to a seating area near the fire. "Please." I settled into a leather chair that probably cost more than my apartment, hyper-aware of Dante taking the seat across from me. In the firelight, his features were softer, the dangerous edge I'd sensed at the club muted, but not entirely absent. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. "Did your interview go well?" I blinked in surprise. "How did you know about that?" "I make it my business to know things, Eliza." "That's not an answer." He considered me for a moment, his dark eyes unreadable. "No, it's not. Would you prefer honesty or comfort?" The question hung between us, weighted with implication. "Honesty," I said firmly. "I've had someone watching your apartment since the night we met." A chill ran through me despite the warmth of the fire. "Why?" "Initially, to ensure your safety. Then, because I couldn't stay away but had obligations that required my attention elsewhere." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I don't apologize for it, but I understand if it makes you uncomfortable." "It should make me uncomfortable," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "It should make me want to leave, but I'm still here." Something flickered in his eyes, triumph, perhaps, or satisfaction. "Yes, you are." A maid entered with a tray of wine and hors d'oeuvres, setting it on the table between us before departing silently. Dante poured 2 glasses, handing one to me, our fingers brushing in a touch that sent electricity up my arm. "You're wearing the bracelet," he observed, his gaze lingering on my wrist. I touched the silver chain with my free hand. I wasn't sure what it meant. "It means I was thinking of you." He took a sip of his wine, watching me over the rim of his glass. "The key is symbolic." "Of what?" "Of choices, Eliza. Doors that can be opened or left closed." The metaphor wasn't lost on me. "And which door does this key open?" "That depends entirely on you." The conversation shifted then, away from symbolism and surveillance to safer topics. Books we'd read, places we'd traveled, the architecture I'd studied in college. Dante was well-educated and articulate, his observations thoughtful, his questions probing without being invasive. As the evening progressed, I found myself relaxing into his company, drawn once again into the orbit of his attention. When he spoke about his passion for preserving historical buildings, his face animated with genuine enthusiasm, it was easy to forget the rumors about his family, the headlines about business interests that spoke of darker enterprises. After dinner in a dining room that could have hosted royalty, he suggested a walk through the gardens. The night air was cool, stars visible above where the city lights didn't reach. Lanterns illuminated stone pathways that wound through sculptured hedges and dormant flower beds. "This place is incredible," I said, my breath visible in the chill air. "How long has it been in your family?" "3 generations," Dante replied, walking close beside me. "My grandfather built it when he came to this country. A statement of ambition, I think." "And what's your ambition, Dante?" He stopped, turning to face me. In the dim light, his expression was serious, almost solemn. "Legacy, security, building something that lasts. Is that why you took over the family business?" His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "My father is unwell." The transition was necessary. I thought of the news article, the carefully worded statements about retirement. "I'm sorry. Is it serious?" "Serious enough." His tone discouraged further questions on that front. "But not why I asked you here tonight." "Why did you ask me here?" Instead of answering, he reached out, his fingers tracing the line of my jaw with feather-light precision. "You fascinate me, Eliza Parker. Your strength, your vulnerability. The way you look at me like you're trying to solve a puzzle." My heart raced at his touch. "And what if I don't like the solution I find?" "Then you walk away." His hand dropped to his side. "I told you, the key is symbolic. The choice is yours." But was it really? Standing in his garden, surrounded by his wealth and power, I felt the illusion of choice more keenly than actual freedom. And yet, I couldn't deny the pull between us, the invisible thread that had drawn me to his door despite every rational objection. "I should go," I said softly, suddenly overwhelmed by the intensity of his gaze, the weight of unspoken possibilities. He nodded, not arguing. "Paolo will drive you home." As we turned back toward the house, a figure emerged from the shadows. Another suited man, moving with urgent purpose. He whispered something in Dante's ear, too low for me to hear. The transformation was immediate and chilling. Dante's expression hardened, his posture straightening, power radiating from him in almost palpable waves. He gave a curt nod, and the man disappeared as quickly as he'd appeared. "I'm afraid something requires my attention," Dante said, his voice clipped, all warmth gone. "Paolo will see you out." Before I could respond, he took my hand, pressing a kiss to my knuckles that seemed at odds with the coldness that had overtaken him. "I'll call you tomorrow." Then he was striding away, leaving me alone in the garden with questions multiplying in my mind. The ride home was silent, Paolo as inscrutable as ever. I watched the city lights blur past the window, wondering what urgent business had called Dante away, and whether I truly wanted to know. True to his word, Dante called the next day. His voice through the phone was warm again, no trace of the steel I'd glimpsed in the garden. "Have dinner with me tonight," he said without preamble. "I can't," I replied, though part of me wanted to say yes. "I have plans with Jen. Tomorrow, then." I hesitated, caution warring with desire. "Dante, I'm not sure this is a good idea." "Because of Michael?" There was an edge to his voice at the name. "Because of who you are," I said honestly. "What your family does." A long pause. "And what do you think my family does, Eliza?" I closed my eyes, phone pressed to my ear. "The news articles call it import, export, and hospitality, but there are implications, rumors, and you believe these rumors?" "I don't know what to believe. That's the problem." Another pause, longer this time. "Have lunch with me tomorrow, in public, somewhere you feel comfortable. Ask me anything you want, and I'll answer honestly." The offer was tempting, more than tempting. "Okay," I agreed finally, "but I choose the place." I suggested a small cafe near my apartment, deliberately picking somewhere far removed from Dante's world of luxury and power. To my surprise, he agreed without hesitation. When I arrived the next day, wearing jeans and a simple sweater, I half expected to find the cafe transformed, reserved for private use, staff replaced with his own people. Instead, it was business as usual. Students with laptops, mothers with strollers, the regular barista who knew my usual order. Dante was already there, seated at a corner table, looking somehow both out of place and perfectly at ease. He'd dressed down for the occasion, dark jeans and a cashmere sweater under a leather jacket, but still attracted curious glances from other patrons. No Paolo in sight. I noted as I approached, though I suspected security lurked nearby. Dante stood as I reached the table, that old-world courtesy I was beginning to expect from him. "Thank you for coming," he said, pulling out my chair. "Thank you for agreeing to meet here," I replied, settling across from him. "It feels more equal." A smile touched his lips. "Is that important to you? Equality? In relationships? Yes." "Is that what we have, Eliza? A relationship?" I felt heat rise to my cheeks. "I don't know what we have." "Neither do I," he admitted, surprising me with his candor. "But I'd like to find out." The server approached, and I ordered my usual tea while Dante requested an espresso. When we were alone again, I took a deep breath. "You said I could ask you anything," he nodded, his dark eyes steady on mine. I did. "What exactly does your family do, Dante?" "The truth." He didn't answer immediately, seeming to weigh his words carefully. "My grandfather came to this country with nothing. He built an empire through whatever means necessary in a time when legitimate opportunities were limited for immigrants like him. And now? Now we have legitimate businesses, real estate, restaurants, nightclubs, import, export. But yes, there are other interests as well. My father was old school, believed in certain traditions." His expression darkened. "I'm making changes." "What kind of changes?" "Moving away from the more problematic aspects of our operations, legitimizing everything." His gaze was intense, unwavering. "It's not an easy transition. There are those who resist change, who prefer my father's way of doing things." I swallowed hard. "Is that what you were handling last night? And at dinner last week?" A muscle ticked in his jaw. "Yes." "Does it involve violence?" "Sometimes," he admitted, his voice low. "Not by my choice, but sometimes it's unavoidable. I should have been repulsed, should have stood up and walked away. Instead, I found myself asking, 'Are you in danger?'" Something softened in his expression. "Are you concerned for me, Eliza? Just answer the question. There's always danger in my world, but I have good people around me." He reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine. "What I don't have is someone who sees me as more than my name, my family. Someone who asks questions instead of making assumptions." His touch was warm, electric. "Is that what you want from me? To see you?" "I want everything from you," he said simply. "But I'll start with that." The raw honesty in his voice left me breathless. This was dangerous territory, far more dangerous than I'd imagined when I'd whispered about making Michael regret losing me in a nightclub. "I have one more question," I said, my voice barely audible above the cafe's ambient noise. "Anything. Why me? Out of all the women you could have, why choose someone broken by an ordinary betrayal? Someone with no connections to your world?" Dante's fingers curled around mine, his grip gentle but firm. "Because when I looked at you that night, standing in a dress that didn't belong to you, trying to convince yourself you were having fun, I recognized something." His thumb traced circles on my palm. "Pain, yes, but more than that. Resilience. Strength. Fire waiting to be rekindled." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "And because when Michael walked up to you in that hallway, I wanted to tear him apart with my bare hands for putting that look in your eyes. I wanted to erase every mark he'd left on your heart. The intensity of his words should have frightened me. Instead, they ignited something deep inside, a spark of want so fierce it took my breath away. I can't promise you safety, Eliza," he continued, his eyes never leaving mine. "But I can promise that if you choose to open that door, to use that key, you will never feel invisible or unwanted again." In that moment, sitting in an ordinary cafe on an ordinary day, I felt the weight of a decision that would change everything. The rational part of my brain screamed caution, reminded me of all I'd read about the Russo family, all Dante had just admitted to. But another part, the part that had been shattered by Michael's betrayal, the part that craved to feel alive again, whispered that some doors were worth opening, regardless of what waited on the other side. "I need time," I said finally, "to think." He nodded, releasing my hand. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." As I left the cafe, the silver bracelet caught the sunlight, the tiny key gleaming like a promise or a warning. 3 days passed without word from Dante. True to his promise, he was giving me time to think, though the silver bracelet on my wrist felt heavier with each passing hour, a constant reminder of the choice that loomed before me. I'd received an offer from the design firm I'd interviewed with, a lifeline back to normalcy and independence. I accepted immediately, grateful for the distraction of work and the promise of rebuilding my career. On my first day, I arrived early, coffee in hand, portfolio tucked under my arm. The office was modern but small, nothing like the prestigious firm I'd left behind, but it hummed with a creative energy that felt immediately welcoming. Eliza Parker? A woman with silver-streaked hair and tortoiseshell glasses approached, hand extended. "I'm Claire Matthews. We spoke on the phone. Welcome to Matthews Design." "Thank you for the opportunity," I said, shaking her hand. "I'm excited to get started." Claire showed me to a desk by a window overlooking a tree-lined street. "We're working on a renovation for the old public library. I thought you might want to take the lead on the interior concepts, given your background." By lunchtime, I was immersed in blueprints and reference materials, the familiar rhythm of design work soothing my frayed nerves. This was what I needed: purpose, focus, a return to the person I'd been before Michael had reduced me to someone whose worth depended on a man's attention. As I walked to a nearby deli for lunch, my phone buzzed with a text from Jen. "Anything from Mr. Dangerous?" I typed back, "No, and that's probably for the best." Her response was immediate. "Is it though? Or are you just scared?" I stared at the screen, unable to formulate a response that wasn't a lie. Because she was right. I was scared. Not of Dante himself, but of what he represented. A life so far removed from the careful, predictable existence I'd planned with Michael that it felt like stepping off a cliff without knowing if I could fly. That evening, I stayed late at the office, losing myself in work until the sky outside my window had darkened to indigo. When I finally emerged onto the street, the autumn air had a sharp bite that hadn't been present that morning. I pulled my coat tighter around me, debating between the subway and a cab when a familiar black SUV pulled up to the curb. My heart stuttered as the rear window lowered to reveal Dante's face, shadowed in the dim interior. "How was your first day?" he asked, as casually as if we'd planned this meeting. I stared at him, caught between irritation and a treacherous flutter of pleasure at seeing him again. "How did you know it was my first day?" "I called the firm when they offered you the position, to congratulate them on their excellent choice." His lips curved in a slight smile. "I may have also sent them a client or two." "You had no right," I said, anger flaring at his presumption. "I don't need your help to succeed." "I know that." His expression turned serious. "But the world isn't always fair to talented people, Eliza. Sometimes deserving candidates are overlooked for reasons that have nothing to do with merit. So you, pulled strings to get me hired?" "No." He opened the door, sliding over to make room. "I simply ensured that your talent received the recognition it deserved. Get in. It's cold." I hesitated, my pride warring with curiosity, and the undeniable desire to be near him again. "Please," he added, the word an echo of the note that had accompanied his address days earlier. I slid into the warmth of the SUV, the leather seat soft beneath me. Dante sat close enough that I could smell his cologne, feel the heat radiating from his body. "I have a proposition for you," he said as the car pulled smoothly away from the curb. "I'm not sure I want to hear it," he smiled, the expression transforming his face in a way that still caught me off guard. "It's not that kind of proposition. At least, not yet." Heat rushed to my cheeks. "What then?" "My family owns a building downtown, one of the original factories from the industrial era. It's been sitting empty for years, but the architecture is remarkable. I'd like to restore it, turn it into something useful, apartments perhaps, or a mixed-use space." His eyes held mine. "I'd like you to design it." I blinked in surprise. "Me? But I just started at Matthews." "This would be a separate project, independent consulting. Claire has already agreed to the arrangement." The realization that he'd planned this, had spoken to my new employer without my knowledge, should have angered me. Instead, I found myself intrigued by the opportunity, and by the chance to see more of Dante's world. "Why me?" I asked, echoing the question I'd posed in the cafe. Because you're talented. Because I want to see what you can create when given free rein. His voice dropped lower. And because I want a reason to see you that doesn't involve explaining my family's history over coffee. The honesty of his answer disarmed me. I'd need to see the building first. Of course. He glanced at his watch. We could go now, if you'd like. Now? It's almost 8 o'clock. Is there somewhere else you need to be? There wasn't, and we both knew it. Fine, I conceded. Show me this building. Dante gave Paolo an address, and we rode in comfortable silence through streets that grew progressively less manicured, finally stopping before an imposing brick structure that occupied nearly a full city block. Illuminated by streetlights, it loomed against the night sky, windows boarded, walls covered in decades of grime. It doesn't look like much now, Dante admitted, as we stood on the sidewalk, gazing up. But wait until you see inside. A security guard appeared from nowhere, unlocking a heavy metal door. Dante took a flashlight from him, offering me his other hand. Watch your step. I hesitated before placing my hand in his, the contact sending a now familiar jolt up my arm. His grip was warm and sure as he led me into the darkness. The beam of the flashlight swept across a vast interior space, illuminating soaring ceilings, massive windows, and cast-iron columns that rose like ancient trees. Despite the dust and debris, the beauty of the architecture was unmistakable, the proportions perfect, the details intact beneath years of neglect. This is incredible, I breathed, my voice echoing in the emptiness. I knew you'd see it, Dante said, satisfaction evident in his tone. The flashlight beam caught his profile as he gazed upward, highlighting the strong line of his jaw, the curve of his lips. It's been in my family for generations, but no one knew what to do with it. Until now. I moved further into the space, mind already racing with possibilities. Until you, he corrected, following close behind. We explored each floor, Dante telling me what he knew of the building's history as we climbed worn staircases and peered into rooms that had once housed machinery. His knowledge was impressive, his passion for preservation evident in the way he pointed out original details worth saving. On the top floor, massive windows looked out over the city skyline, lights twinkling like stars fallen to earth. The view alone is worth the restoration, I said, mesmerized by the panorama before us. I thought you might say that. Dante moved to stand beside me, our shoulders nearly touching as we gazed out at the city. So you'll take the project? I turned to face him, suddenly aware of how alone we were, how far from the world of ordinary concerns. Yes, I said quietly. I'll take it. His smile was slow, satisfied. Good. The air between us seemed to thicken, charged with possibility. Dante lifted a hand, brushing a strand of hair from my face with a gentleness that belied the strength I knew he possessed. Eliza, he said, my name almost a question. I knew what he was asking, what he had been asking since that first night at the club. The key around my wrist seemed to burn against my skin, a reminder of the door that stood before me, waiting to be unlocked. I'm afraid, I admitted, the words barely audible. Of me? His fingers traced the line of my jaw, feather-light, of myself, of what I might become if I let this happen. His eyes held mine, dark and fathomless in the dim light. And what might that be? Someone who doesn't recognize herself anymore? Someone who loses herself in your world? Or someone who finds herself? He countered, his thumb brushing my lower lip. Someone who discovers parts of herself she never knew existed. My breath caught at his touch. Your world is dangerous, Dante. Yes. He didn't deny it, didn't try to soften the truth. But I can keep you safe. Can you? I whispered, remembering the cold transformation I'd witnessed in the garden, the hints of violence beneath the surface. With my life, he promised. And I believed him. When his lips finally met mine, it felt inevitable, as though every moment since our first meeting had been leading to this. The kiss was gentle at first, almost questioning, but quickly deepened into something hungry and desperate. His arms encircled me, pulling me against the hard planes of his chest as my hands found their way to the nape of his neck, fingers threading through his hair. Time seemed to suspend as we stood entwined against the backdrop of the city. the abandoned building a cocoon separating us from reality. When we finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, I felt altered, as though something fundamental had shifted within me. Dante's eyes were dark with desire, his expression fierce and possessive. "Come home with me," he said, his voice rough. The request was tempting, dangerously so, but something held me back, a last vestige of self-preservation. "Not tonight," I said softly. "I need time," he finished for me, a rueful smile touching his lips. "Always time with you." "Is that a problem?" He brushed his thumb across my cheek. "No, you're worth waiting for, Eliza Parker." The drive back to my apartment was charged with unspoken desires, the space between us on the leather seat both too wide and not wide enough. When the SUV pulled up to my building, Dante walked me to the door, his hand resting lightly at the small of my back. "I'll call you tomorrow about the project," he said, restraint evident in the careful distance he maintained. "Okay." I fumbled for my keys, suddenly shy under his intense gaze. "Eliza." He waited until I looked up at him. "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me. Not just Dante Russo, but me." The sincerity in his voice touched something deep inside me. Before I could overthink it, I rose on tiptoe, pressing a quick kiss to his lips before retreating into my building. That night, I dreamed of empty buildings filled with light, of keys and doors, and the feeling of falling with no fear of hitting the ground. The next morning brought a delivery, a sleek tablet with blueprints of the factory building already loaded, along with historical photographs and structural reports. The accompanying note was simple: to build something new, D. I spent the weekend immersed in research, sketching preliminary concepts between shifts at Matthew's Design. By Monday, my apartment was covered in drawings and material samples, my mind buzzing with possibilities. Dante called each evening, our conversations ranging from technical details of the project to personal histories we'd never shared with anyone else. He told me about growing up in the shadow of his father's reputation, about summers in Italy, with a grandfather who taught him to value tradition while embracing change. I shared stories of my small-town childhood, my parents' divorce, the scholarship that had brought me to the city, and the dreams that had kept me there. With each call, each shared confidence, the space between our worlds narrowed, though I knew it would never disappear entirely. A week after our kiss in the abandoned factory, Dante invited me to dinner at his estate. To discuss the project, he said. Though we both knew it was more than that, I accepted, the decision easier than it should have been. Paolo picked me up at 7, driving me through the iron gates that no longer seemed quite so imposing. This time, Dante met me at the door himself, taking my coat with a familiarity that sent warmth coursing through me. "I thought we'd eat in the conservatory," he said, leading me through the mansion to a glass structure attached to the rear. Inside, tropical plants created a lush garden around a small table set for 2. Overhead, stars shone through the glass ceiling, more visible here away from the city's glow. "This is beautiful," I said, accepting the glass of wine he offered. It was my mother's favorite room. A shadow crossed his face. She died when I was 10. I touched his arm gently. "I'm sorry." He covered my hand with his. It was a long time ago. Dinner was served by a staff that appeared and disappeared with practiced discretion. The food was exquisite, the wine perfectly paired, but it was Dante's undivided attention that made the evening extraordinary. He listened as I explained my vision for the factory building, asking insightful questions that helped refine my ideas. "You're remarkable," he said as we lingered over dessert. "The way you see potential where others see only decay. Isn't that what you do too?" I asked. "See something worth saving in the things your family built, even if the methods were questionable?" A slow smile spread across his face. "Perhaps we're not so different after all." "Perhaps not," I agreed, the realization both surprising and comforting. After dinner, he gave me a proper tour of the estate, the art collection his grandfather had started, the library where generations of Russos had studied, the music room with its grand piano that Dante admitted he played, though not as well as I should, given the lessons I endured. We ended in a sitting room off the main bedroom, a more intimate space than the formal rooms downstairs. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting golden light across rich furnishings. "Would you like a drink?" Dante asked, moving to a bar cart in the corner. "No," I said softly. "I don't want anything to blur tonight." He set down the crystal decanter he'd picked up, turning to face me. The firelight caught the angles of his face, his eyes dark and intent. "What do you want, Eliza?" I moved toward him slowly, each step deliberate. The silver bracelet gleamed on my wrist, the key a reminder of the choice before me, a choice I realized I'd already made. "You," I answered simply. "I want you." Something fierce and primal flashed in his eyes before he closed the distance between us, gathering me into his arms with a hunger that matched my own. His kiss was possessive, claiming, his hands moving over me as if memorizing every curve. "Are you sure?" he whispered against my lips, restraint evident in the tension of his body. In answer, I reached for the buttons of his shirt, my fingers steady despite the pounding of my heart. "I'm sure." His control seemed to snap at my words. He lifted me effortlessly, carrying me through to the bedroom beyond, where he laid me on a bed draped in silk the color of midnight. What followed was a revelation. Dante's body hard and perfect above mine, his hands alternately gentle and demanding as they explored every inch of me. He whispered my name like a prayer, like something precious, as we moved together in the darkness. Afterward, lying in his arms with my head on his chest, I traced the lines of a scar that ran across his ribs, evidence of the danger that was never far from his world. "How did you get this?" I asked, my finger following the silvery mark. "A disagreement with a business associate," he said, his hand stroking my hair, "before I took over from my father." I propped myself up on one elbow, studying his face in the dim light. "Are there many more like it?" "A few." His expression was guarded. "Does that bother you?" "Yes," I admitted, "but not for the reason you think. I don't like the thought of you in danger." His features softened, something vulnerable passing across his face. "No one has worried about me in a very long time, Eliza. Well, someone should." I pressed a kiss to the scar, then to his lips. "Someone does." He pulled me closer, his arms tightening around me as if he feared I might disappear. "Stay," he murmured against my hair. "Stay with me tonight." I nodded, settling back against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart beneath my ear. For the first time since Michael's betrayal, perhaps for the first time ever, I felt completely seen, completely wanted. Not for who I might become or what I might offer, but for exactly who I was. As sleep claimed me, I knew with certainty that the door was open now. The key turned in the lock. Whatever waited on the other side, danger, passion, a world I could barely imagine, I would face it with my eyes open, my choice made. What I didn't know was how soon that choice would be tested, or how high the stakes would become. Morning sunlight streamed through windows I didn't recognize, warming my skin as I blinked away sleep. For a moment, disorientation gripped me. The silk sheets, the vast bedroom, the unfamiliar weight of an arm draped possessively across my waist. Then memory rushed back, and with it a flush of heat that had nothing to do with the sun. I turned carefully, not wanting to wake Dante, and found myself facing his sleeping form. In repose, he looked younger, the hard edges of vigilance softened by slumber. Dark lashes fanned against his cheeks, his hair tousled from my fingers, his lips slightly parted. A bruise darkened one shoulder. My doing, I realized with a mix of embarrassment and pride. As if sensing my scrutiny, his eyes opened, instantly alert despite the early hour. He watched me for a moment, something almost like wonder in his gaze. "You stayed," he said, voice rough with sleep. I did. I reached out, tracing the line of his jaw with my fingertip. "Good morning." His answering smile was slow, intimate. He caught my hand, pressing a kiss to my palm that sent a shiver down my spine. The best morning. What followed was a leisurely rediscovery of each other's bodies, unhurried in the golden light of dawn. Afterward, wrapped in his silk robe, I stood on the balcony outside his bedroom, watching mist rise from the gardens below while Dante ordered breakfast. "You're thinking too hard," he said, joining me with a cup of coffee that he placed in my hands. "I can see it in your face," I accepted the coffee gratefully, the porcelain warm against my palms. Just processing. Regrets? His tone was casual, but I caught the tension beneath the question. No, I said honestly, meeting his gaze. Just wondering what happens now. He leaned against the balustrade, watching me over the rim of his own cup. What would you like to happen? The question was deceptively simple. What did I want? A return to my carefully ordered life seemed impossible now, like trying to fit back into clothes I'd outgrown. But diving headlong into Dante's world, with all its complexities and dangers, terrified me. I want balance, I said finally. My work, my independence, but also this. I gestured between us, whatever this is becoming. Dante set down his cup, closing the distance between us. His hand settled on my waist, warm and steady. This, he said softly, is everything, Eliza, but your independence is part of what draws me to you. I would never ask you to give that up. Relief washed through me at his understanding. Thank you. His lips brushed mine, a gentle promise. Just don't shut me out. The rest, we can figure out together. Breakfast arrived. A feast served on the balcony as the sun climbed higher in the autumn sky. We spoke of practical things, my work schedule, the factory project, a charity gala he was hosting the following weekend. You'll come, of course, he said, refilling my coffee cup. As my guest, the thought of appearing publicly at Dante's side, of stepping fully into his world, sent a flutter of anxiety through me. Will there be press? He nodded, understanding my concern. Some. But you won't be alone. I'll be with you every moment. I took a deep breath, pushing down the fear. Okay. I'll need a dress. Already taken care of. At my raised eyebrow, he added, a selection will be delivered to your apartment. Choose whatever you like. Dante, I began, a protest forming, but he silenced me with a look. Let me do this for you, Eliza. Not because you need it, but because it pleases me to give you beautiful things. Put that way, it was difficult to argue. Fine, but I'm paying for the alterations. He laughed, the sound rich and genuine. A compromise. I'm learning. Paolo drove me home later that morning, my body pleasantly sore, my mind oddly at peace despite the magnitude of the step I'd taken. At my apartment door, he handed me a small box, another gift from Dante. Inside was a delicate gold chain with a small, perfect key that matched the silver one on my bracelet. The note simply read, for safekeeping, D. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. I fastened the necklace around my throat, the key settling in the hollow between my collarbones like it belonged there. The week that followed developed a rhythm. Days spent at Matthew's design, evenings divided between work on the factory project and time with Dante. Sometimes he came to my apartment, seeming oddly at home in my modest space. Other nights, Paolo drove me to the estate, where we'd dine and talk and make love with an intensity that left me breathless. Dante was careful to keep certain aspects of his business separate from our time together, but occasionally I glimpsed the other side of his life. Hushed phone calls in Italian, men in suits arriving for tense meetings, the ever-present security that surrounded him. He never lied about the nature of his world, but neither did he burden me with details I might be safer not knowing. For my part, I was careful to maintain my independence, refusing his offer of a car and driver, insisting on paying my own bills despite his protests. You can buy me dinner, I told him firmly, but you don't get to buy me. Rather than being offended, he seemed to respect my boundaries, even as he systematically dismantled other defenses I'd built around my heart. The night of the gala arrived with a flutter of nerves I couldn't quite suppress. As promised, a selection of evening gowns had been delivered to my apartment, each more exquisite than the last. I chose a deep emerald silk that fell like water against my skin, simple but elegant, with a neckline that showcased the key necklace that I hadn't removed since Dante gave it to me. When he arrived to escort me, his appreciation was evident in the heat of his gaze. You're breathtaking, he said, circling me slowly, his eyes missing nothing. You clean up pretty well yourself, I replied, taking in his perfectly tailored tuxedo with appreciation. His smile was slow, intimate. The most beautiful woman in the room, wearing my key around her neck. Every man there will envy me tonight. Is that why you invited me? As a trophy? I kept my tone light, teasing, though the question held a kernel of genuine concern. Dante's expression turned serious. No, Eliza. I invited you because even in a room full of people, I'm lonely without you now. The naked honesty in his voice silenced any further teasing. I reached up, straightening his bow tie though it didn't need it, needing the contact. Then we should go. I wouldn't want you to be lonely. The gala was held at the city's most prestigious hotel, a historic building that had hosted dignitaries and celebrities for generations. As our car pulled up to the entrance, camera flashes illuminated the night, reporters calling out to the arriving guests. Dante's hand settled at the small of my back, warm and reassuring. Ready? I nodded, summoning confidence I didn't entirely feel. Ready. The moment we stepped onto the red carpet, a hush fell over the waiting press, followed by an explosion of flashes and questions. Dante guided me through with practiced ease, pausing briefly for photos but declining to answer questions, his body angled protectively toward mine. Inside, the ballroom was a glittering spectacle of wealth and influence. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light over tables draped in white linen, floral arrangements towering from their centers. A string quartet played discreetly in one corner, providing a soundtrack for the mingling guests. Dante! A silver-haired man in a tuxedo approached, hand extended. Good to see you, my boy. Senator Williams. Dante greeted him, shaking his hand firmly. May I introduce Eliza Parker? Eliza, Senator James Williams. I shook the offered hand, noting the politician's assessing gaze. A pleasure, Senator. The pleasure is mine, my dear. His eyes flicked to Dante, something knowing in his expression. I've known Dante since he was a boy. His father and I go way back. The senator has been a friend to my family for many years, Dante said, his tone revealing nothing of what that friendship might entail. And I hope to continue that relationship with the new generation, Williams replied, a weight to his words that suggested more than simple social connection. We should discuss that project we spoke about, Dante. Perhaps next week? My office will call yours, Dante said smoothly, a polite dismissal that the senator seemed to accept without offense. As Williams moved away, I felt Dante's hand tighten slightly at my waist. Politics, he murmured near my ear, always a delicate dance. The evening continued in a blur of introductions. Business associates, society figures, other families with interests that seemed to mirror Dante's own. I smiled and shook hands, and tried to keep track of names and connections, all the while aware of Dante's constant presence at my side, his subtle guidance through the intricate social landscape. What struck me most was the respect he commanded, not fear, as I might have expected, but genuine deference. Even those who clearly viewed him as a rival approached with caution and courtesy. You've surprised them, Dante said, as we took a moment alone near one of the massive floral arrangements. How so? They expected someone different at my side, someone more decorative. I raised an eyebrow. And I'm not decorative enough? His laugh was low, intimate. You're exquisite, Eliza, but you're also intelligent, perceptive. He brushed a strand of hair from my face, his touch lingering. You notice things. That makes them nervous. Before I could respond, a commotion near the entrance caught our attention. Dante's posture changed instantly, tension radiating from him as his gaze fixed on the new arrivals. What is it? I asked, following his line of sight to a group of men in tuxedos, one older, white-haired, and distinguished, flanked by younger men who bore a familial resemblance. The Castellis, Dante said, his voice tight. They shouldn't be here. I recognized the name from news articles about rival business interests, though the specifics had been carefully vague. Are they competitors? Among other things. His jaw tightened as the elder Castelli spotted us and began making his way through the crowd. Stay close to me. Paolo and another security man appeared as if summoned, positioning themselves discreetly nearby as the Castellis approached. Dante Russo, the older man said, his accent heavier than Dante's, his smile not reaching his cold eyes. What a surprise to see you here. I didn't think charity was your family's strong suit. Antonio. Dante's voice was cordial, though I felt the tension in his body where his arm pressed against mine. I could say the same about you. Antonio's gaze shifted to me, assessing in a way that made my skin crawl. And who is this lovely creature? Have you finally found yourself a woman worthy of the Russo name? Eliza Parker, I said before Dante could answer, extending my hand with more confidence than I felt. A pleasure to meet you, Mr. Castelli. The older man's eyebrows rose slightly at my directness, but he took my hand, bringing it to his lips in an old-world gesture. The pleasure is mine, Bella. Tell me, does she know what kind of man she's keeping company with, Dante? She knows everything she needs to know, Dante replied, his voice dangerously soft. Antonio released my hand, his eyes never leaving Dante's. Everything? I doubt that very much. He gestured to the younger men behind him. You remember my sons, of course. They've been asking about you. The threat was thinly veiled, the atmosphere charged with potential violence despite the elegant surroundings. Perhaps we should discuss family matters another time, Dante suggested, his tone making it clear it wasn't a suggestion at all. This is hardly the place, Antonio smiled, the expression cold and calculating. As you wish, but we will talk, Dante, soon. His gaze returned to me. Enjoy your evening, Ms. Parker, while it lasts. As they moved away, I felt Dante's arm slide around my waist, pulling me closer to his side. I'm sorry about that, he said quietly. I didn't expect them to be here. What did he mean? About it not lasting? Dante's expression was grim. The Castellis have opposed the changes I'm making. They prefer the old ways, my father's ways. Is that why you said they're dangerous? Because they don't want you to legitimize the business? He nodded, guiding me toward a quieter corner of the ballroom. Antonio Castelli and my father were partners of a sort, but Antonio's methods became too extreme, even for my father. They had a falling out, and now that you're in charge, he sees an opportunity, I guessed, the pieces falling into place, or a threat. Dante's gaze was intense, searching. This is my world, Eliza. The danger, the politics, the constant vigilance. Are you sure it's what you want? I touched the key at my throat, a reminder of the choice I'd made. I want you, I said simply. The rest, I'll adjust. Something fierce and possessive flashed in his eyes. He bent his head, lips brushing my ear as he whispered, "Let's leave. Now." The urgency in his voice sent a shiver down my spine. What about your charity? I've made my donation. My presence was just a formality. His hand at my waist guided me toward the exit. I find I'm suddenly very eager to be alone with you. The drive back to the estate was charged with unspoken tension, Dante's hand resting on my thigh, his thumb tracing small circles against the silk of my dress. The encounter with the Castellis seemed to have awakened something primal in him, a need to claim, to possess. When we reached his bedroom, his usual control gave way to something more desperate, more demanding. He took me against the door before we even made it to the bed, my emerald dress pushed up around my waist, his hands gripping my hips hard enough to bruise. Later, as we lay tangled in the sheets, my head pillowed on his chest, he traced lazy patterns on my bare shoulder. I should apologize for my behavior, he murmured. I propped myself up on one elbow, studying his face in the dim light. Don't you dare. A smile tugged at his lips, though something somber lingered in his eyes. Seeing you with Antonio, it made me realize how easily you could be taken from me. The admission sent a chill through me. What do you mean? Dante sat up, the sheet pooling around his waist as he ran a hand through his tousled hair. The Castellis are dangerous, Eliza. More dangerous than I've let on. Because they want to keep the illegal operations going? That, and because they blame me for what happened to Antonio's youngest son. His expression darkened. Marco was involved in some particularly unsavory activities, things I refused to be part of. When I cut those operations, Marco tried to continue them independently. He was arrested. Antonio blames me for not protecting him. I sat up as well, pulling the sheet around me, and he'd... What? Try to hurt me to get to you? It's how men like Antonio think. Target what matters most. His hand cupped my cheek, his eyes intense. And you, Eliza, matter most to me now. The declaration should have frightened me. Instead, it filled me with a warmth that spread through my chest, displacing the fear. What do we do? I've increased security. Paolo will be with you whenever I can't be. His thumb traced my lower lip, and I think, perhaps it's time you moved in here with me. The suggestion took me by surprise. Dante, we've only been seeing each other for a few weeks. I know it's fast, he acknowledged, but it's also practical. I can keep you safe here. I have my job, my apartment. Keep them both, he interrupted. Work as you always have. The apartment can be your office for the factory project. But come home to me at night, Eliza. Let me know you're safe. Home. The word resonated in a way I hadn't expected. Despite the grandeur of the estate, despite the world of difference between Dante's life and the one I'd planned with Michael, the idea of making a home with him felt surprisingly right. Okay, I said softly. I'll move in. But, I added, pressing a finger to his chest, I'm still paying my own rent. The apartment stays in my name. Relief washed over his features, followed by a smile that transformed his face, always negotiating Ms. Parker. Get used to it, Mr. Russo. I leaned in, pressing my lips to his in a seal of our agreement. The next week was a whirlwind of practical arrangements. I moved essential belongings to the estate while maintaining my apartment as planned. Dante installed a state-of-the-art security system in both places, and insisted on driving me to and from work himself whenever possible. If my colleagues at Matthews Design noticed the black SUV that dropped me off each morning, or the security man who occasionally accompanied me to site visits, they were too professional to comment. Claire merely raised an eyebrow when I explained my new living situation, her only remark a dry, "Well, that escalated quickly." The factory project progressed rapidly, my vision for the space taking shape in detailed renderings and material samples. Dante gave me complete creative freedom, his only stipulation that we preserve as much of the original architecture as possible, a condition I would have insisted on anyway. Life developed a new rhythm, different from anything I'd imagined but satisfying in ways I hadn't anticipated. Waking in Dante's arms each morning, sharing breakfast before heading to our separate responsibilities, evenings spent discussing our days, Dante increasingly willing to share the complexities of his world as I demonstrated my ability to understand without judgment. I learned more about the changes he was implementing. Divesting from gambling operations, shifting resources to legitimate real estate ventures, establishing scholarship funds for underprivileged youth. Behind the feared name, I discovered a man determined to transform his inheritance into something he could be proud of. My grandfather came to this country with nothing, he told me one night, as we sat before the fire in his study. He built an empire the only way he knew how, through force and fear. My father continued that tradition. But I want something different, something lasting. A legacy, I said, remembering his words from weeks before. Yes. His fingers intertwined with mine, something I wouldn't be ashamed for my children to inherit. The casual mention of children, our children, sent a flutter through me that I wasn't ready to examine too closely. 3 weeks after moving in, I returned to my apartment to collect more design materials for the factory project. Paolo waited in the car outside, having insisted on accompanying me despite my protests that a quick errand hardly warranted security. I was gathering blueprints from my desk when a noise at the door made me freeze. Before I could react, the door burst open, revealing 3 men in dark clothing, their faces obscured by ski masks. Terror froze me in place as they advanced into the apartment. "Ms. Parker," the leader said, his voice muffled by the mask. "You'll be coming with us." Adrenaline surged through me, breaking the paralysis. I lunged for my phone on the desk, but one of the men was faster, knocking it from my hand while another grabbed me from behind, a gloved hand clamping over my mouth. "Mr. Castelli would like a word," the leader continued, producing a syringe that glinted in the afternoon light. "Don't worry, this won't hurt much." The mention of Castelli confirmed my worst fears. I struggled against my captor's grip, my scream muffled by his hand as the leader approached with the syringe. A sudden crash from the hallway diverted their attention. The door flew open again, this time revealing Paolo, gun drawn and expression deadly. "Let her go," he commanded, his usually impassive face transformed by cold fury. The man holding me tightened his grip, using me as a shield. Back off, or she gets hurt. What happened next was a blur of violence and noise. Paolo fired twice in rapid succession, each shot finding its target with terrifying precision. The leader dropped, the syringe skittering across the floor. The second man fell clutching his shoulder, a scream tearing from his throat. The man holding me pressed something cold against my neck. A knife, I realized with horror. "Drop it," he growled at Paolo. "Or I cut her throat." For a terrible moment, the room was frozen in deadly tableau. Then a new voice spoke from the doorway, Dante's voice, cold and commanding. "If you harm her," he said, stepping into view with a calmness that was more frightening than rage, "there will be nowhere on this earth you can hide. No hole deep enough, no distance far enough. I will find you, and what happens next will make death seem like mercy." The threat, delivered with such certainty, seemed to penetrate the mask of bravado. The knife at my throat wavered, then lowered slightly. It was all the opening Paolo needed. His third shot found its mark, and suddenly I was free, falling forward as my captor collapsed behind me. Dante was there instantly, gathering me into his arms, his body shielding mine from the carnage as he guided me toward the door. "Don't look," he murmured against my hair. "Just keep walking." Outside, more of Dante's men had arrived, securing the scene with efficient precision. He bundled me into the waiting SUV, his arm tight around my shoulders as Paolo took the wheel. "Are you hurt?" Dante asked, his hands moving over me, checking for injuries with gentle urgency. I shook my head, shock making it difficult to form words. "How did you—" Paolo called when he realized something was wrong. I was nearby. His voice was steady, but I could feel the rage vibrating through him, barely contained. "Castellis," he said, the name a curse. "This ends tonight." Fear cut through the shock. "What are you going to do?" His expression hardened, something cold and ruthless replacing the man I'd come to know. "What's necessary?" "Dante, please," I gripped his arm. "Don't do something you can't come back from. Not because of me." Something in my voice seemed to reach him. The deadly calm in his eyes flickered, replaced by a different kind of determination. "I won't let them threaten you, Eliza." "I can't. Then find another way," I urged. "You've been working so hard to change things, to build something better. Don't throw that away now." He was silent for a long moment, conflict evident in the tension of his body. Finally, he nodded once. "Another way, then." That night, after a doctor had examined me and found nothing worse than bruises and shock, Dante made a series of phone calls, to the police commissioner, to Senator Williams, to other names I didn't recognize. By morning, news had broken of a major organized crime bust, with Antonio Castelli and his sons arrested on charges ranging from racketeering to attempted kidnapping. "How?" I asked Dante as we watched the news coverage from the safety of his study. "Evidence I've been gathering for months," he explained, his arms secure around my shoulders. "Financial records, witness statements, recorded conversations. I was waiting for the right moment to turn it over to authorities I trust." "And this was the right moment?" His eyes met mine, fierce and unwavering. "They threatened you." There was no choice after that. I leaned into his embrace, the events of the previous day still raw, but beginning to recede. "What happens now? With your business? With the changes you wanted to make?" "We continue," he said simply. "With the Castellis gone, the last major opposition to legitimate operations is removed. It won't be easy, but the path is clearer now." "And us?" I asked quietly, the question that had been hovering since the moment of danger. Dante turned to face me fully, taking my hands in his. "When I saw that knife at your throat," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I realized something I think I've known since the night we met. I can't imagine my life without you in it, Eliza." He reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. "This isn't because of what happened yesterday," he said as he opened it, revealing a diamond ring that caught the morning light. "I've had this for weeks, waiting for the right moment." My breath caught as he knelt before me, still holding my hands. "Eliza Parker, you walked into my life and saw the man behind the name, behind the reputation. You challenged me, believed in me. made me want to be worthy of you. His dark eyes held mine, vulnerable in a way I'd rarely seen. Will you marry me? Tears blurred my vision as I looked down at him. This powerful, complex man who had upended my carefully planned life and given me something far more precious in return. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd gone to that club wanting to make Michael regret losing me, never imagining I'd find someone who made Michael's betrayal seem like a blessing in disguise. Yes, I whispered. Then more strongly, yes, I'll marry you. Joy transformed Dante's face as he slid the ring onto my finger, then pulled me into his arms. His kiss a promise of the future we would build together, a future that would blend my world of creation and his world of power into something entirely new. Later that evening, as we stood on the balcony watching the sun set over the estate that would now truly become our home, Dante's arms wrapped around me from behind, his cheek resting against my hair. Are you sure, Eliza? He asked softly. My world will never be entirely safe, entirely normal. I turned in his embrace, meeting his gaze steadily. I don't want normal, I told him, the truth of it resonating deep within me. I want you. All of you. Exactly as you are. His smile was slow, tender in a way few people would ever see. And I want all of you. Your strength, your vision, your unwavering heart. As his lips met mine, the silver bracelet and gold necklace caught the fading light. 2 keys, 2 doors that had led us to each other. Michael had been wrong about so many things, but most of all in thinking I was too predictable, too safe. With Dante, I had discovered depths of courage and passion I never knew I possessed. I had whispered, "Make him regret losing me," in a desperate attempt to reclaim my worth. Instead, I had found a man who never made me question it in the first place, a man who saw me, valued me, and would move heaven and earth to keep me safe at his side. The door was open now, the path before us uncharted but filled with possibility. Whatever challenges came, whatever shadows lingered from the past, we would face them together, the architect and the reformed crime boss, building a future neither of us could have imagined alone. And somewhere across the city, I knew with absolute certainty that Michael was indeed regretting his choice, though I no longer cared. I had found something far more precious than revenge. I had found home.